Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of What the Forensics. I'm Nicole. I'll be the MC today, and I am joined here again by the lovely Rebecca and Journey. We just want to quickly apologize too for the little bit of a delay in episodes. We all have jobs now. Who would have thought? So that's been taking up a bit of our lives, but hopefully we can get on a 3-week schedule and get some more out to you. But anyways, this week, Journey is going to tell us all about the case of the lethal lovers, Cathy Wood and Gwen Graham. And Rebecca will be educating us on the intricacies of female serial killers and why they are so uncommon. I would also like to note that there's a listener's discretion advised, as there are detailed descriptions of murder and brief descriptions of infant abuse. And on that note, I would like to pass it off to Journey if you want to tell us a little bit about these lethal lovers.
All right, yeah. So I'm going to introduce you to Gwen Graham and Cathy Wood, who they are, what they did, where they are now, and then I have some just extra fun information about their case. So Gwendolyn Graham, or Gwen, was born on August 6th, 1963 in California. And even though she was born in California, she grew up in Texas and then moved to Michigan in 1986 when she was 23. So with that move, she was able to start work as a nurse's aide at Alpine Nursing Home in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where Cathy Wood also worked. And Catherine May Wood, or Cathy, was born in 1962. She got married super young, and then when she was 24, her 7-year marriage was dissolving, and she gained a lot of weight, eventually reaching a weight of 450 pounds when Graham started working with her, so she was not a small lady. Apparently, it's also very important that we mention her weight because every single source I read mentioned it, and it seemed rather important, even though they were kind of using it to make her seem more vulnerable and desperate for friends and love, which I don't really like, but that's what they had. And so Wood was hired at Alpine Manor in July of 1985, and she was soon promoted to supervisor. And she didn't have a lot of friends, but quickly became friends and then lovers with Graham in 1986. And so in their relationship, they commonly practiced erotic asphyxiation to achieve better orgasms. And then Graham began to talk about committing murder as part of their sex life. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Right? It's just a natural segue.
Yeah.
Wood didn't really believe her and kind of thought that Graham wasn't being serious, even though the whole aspect of pleasure and pain was very common in their sex lives. So Wood was submissive to Graham, who was more dominant and sexually experimentative, which was not surprising, as we will soon learn with their crimes, which leads me into what they did. So they were nurses at Alpine Manor Nursing Home in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and that is where they met, and Wood was Graham's supervisor. So at the start of their crimes, Wood was lookout, and Graham had attempted to kill some women, but the women were strong enough to fight back, so she was unsuccessful in killing them. I'm not sure how many they had attempted to kill first, but either way, the women didn't actually file any complaints against Graham or Wood, even though she had quite literally tried to kill them. And Graham and Wood received glowing reviews from their superiors, and they were both very well liked by all the patients.
Except the few that were attempted to be killed.
No, including the few. They didn't ever file any complaints. Yeah.
But wouldn't they still not, like, they wouldn't put a glowing review in for them, would they?
You would think not. But they didn't have any complaints. Nobody said anything bad about them.
What?
Yeah. Which is just surprising. But yeah. So in January 1987, they killed their first victim, who had Alzheimer's and was too incapacitated to fight back, which is super sad. And the reason that her death was never investigated, my bad, was because the death appeared to be natural.
In
So
what way natural?
they just
Like
said
heart attack or kind of old age, but not being old?
just there was no evidence of suffocation. So they were just, she passed away.
Oh. Couldn't there be other ways of dying of not suffocation?
Yeah, there was no
You
there
know
was
what I mean?
no
Like,
evidence on any of the people. None of the bodies were ever investigated because they all thought they were natural.
that's a good start. I'm really liking how this is starting. Okay,
Yeah.
carry on.
Yeah, so like I said, Wood would stand at a place where she could watch the murder and the nurse's station so that she can distract coworkers who came too close to the room. And so then Graham would then press a washcloth across the nose and mouth of her victim until they died. So that's how she would kill them. And because they were so old and basically on the brink of death, they were never investigated because it was thought to be natural.
That's very sad.
Very sad, yeah. And then they would make love after to kind of relive the excitement of killing.
Oh my god.
And, okay, even grosser, they would then make love while they washed the body to prepare it for burial.
What?
Which just makes
Please
me
tell
feel
me they
all
didn't-
kind of gross.
Please tell
I
me
don't
they
like
didn't
that.
do anything with the dead body.
Not that I'm
Like-
aware of.
Okay.
No, it was just the excitement of the murder that got them off.
Oh
Ew.
my lord.
Yeah, so, gross. So that was January. By April 1987, they had killed 4 more individuals whose ages range from 65 to 97. And
Oh.
yeah, all 4 of these individuals also had Alzheimer's and were too incapacitated to fight back like their first victim. So Graham actually picked the weaker women because of her mistakes with their first intended victims who were too strong and fought back. And interestingly, they chose their victims to spell the word murder with their last name's initials as their way of making it a game. But
As one does, because that's normal.
yeah, right? But they actually got rid of that plan after Graham failed to kill their first couple victims. So then it was just purely sexual. And so Graham would
So
also
they got lazy really fast.
yeah, really fast, right? So Graham would take souvenirs from their victims so that she could relive their deaths. And both women actually bragged about smothering like 6 people to their coworkers, but no one believed them.
Oh my god.
I feel like your first response to someone telling you, hey, I killed 6 people, you wouldn't be like, oh, no, you didn't. You're so silly. You'd be like, I'm concerned. I'm going to maybe tell someone just in case.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
You'd be like, oh, that
especially-
patient just died. And you just told me you
Yeah.
murdered them. So, like,
Yeah, like I wonder, did they brag like with specific names? Or they're like, hey, I smothered someone today. You don't know who, but I did.
I have no idea. But, like, all of their coworkers were just like, hey, those are kind of like tasteless jokes. They just pass them off as jokes.
Oh my god.
And I was like, you shouldn't joke about that.
No.
Yeah, and Graham actually showed them her souvenirs, which were like anklets, handkerchiefs, brooches, and a set of dentures.
Oh.
And they thought nothing of it. They weren't like, okay.
Yeah, she had
right.
them on a shelf in her home, I believe. And when her coworkers would come over, she'd be like, look at my souvenirs that I got from killing people.
Maybe these women also need to be investigated. My god.
Yeah, right? I was like, ooh.
This
And
is
they-
like your box of sheep bones in your house.
Yeah,
You're just
but
like,
that-
hey, look at my sheep bones. But instead it's murdered people's belongings.
yeah, look at my set of dentures from so-and-so who I murdered last week. I don't get it. I don't know how none of their alarm bells were like, hey, this is sketchy business, but they just never thought twice about it.
What year did this happen again? Like what decade?
1987.
Okay, see, if it was a little earlier, I'd be like, it's the 70s. It's the 60s. But, you know, Can't really pass it off at that time.
Nope. Yeah. So that was kind of like the end of their crimes or whatever. It's short and sweet in a 4-month span. And so they broke up when Graham asked Wood to kill someone to prove her love, but she wouldn't do it.
I don't blame her.
I know. I was like, yeah, good on you. Wood was then transferred to another shift, and Graham ended up moving to Texas with another woman and got a job looking after babies.
No.
Oh, good.
Yeah, big
Good.
yikes. Ugh. So,
Awesome.
oh, I was popping my knuckles. In 1987, Wood broke down after Graham left and told her ex-husband about the killings, and then he told the police in October 1988. So he waited just over a year to tell the police. And it's thought that Wood confessed because she was afraid for the children who Graham was taking care of in her new job. And during the trial, she is quoted saying, "When she was killing people at Alpine and I didn't do anything, that was bad enough. But when she would call me and say how she wanted to smash a baby, I had to stop her somehow. I knew she was working in a hospital there. She said she wanted to take one of the babies and smash it up against a window. I had to do something. I didn't care about myself anymore." End
Oh
quote.
my god. No. That's.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to react to that. I don't.
I don't know what to say. I just hear sitting with my mouth open. What?
Yeah. It's so grimy. I don't like it. But at least she did eventually come forward. And so when her ex-husband went to the police, they were obviously skeptical of his stories because 40 people had died at Alpine Manor during the months that they were active in 1987. However, once they investigated, 8 individuals stood out to the police. And so the police then narrowed it down to 5, who were 60-year-old Marguerite Chambers, 89-year-old Edith Cole, 95-year-old Myrtle Luce, 79-year-old Mae Mason, and 74-year-old Belle Burkhard. So obviously their last names do not spell murder. And there was no evidence of murder on any of those victims, but with Wood's ex-husband's statement and some statements of their coworkers, who after her ex-husband had gone to the police, were like, "Oh yeah, they used to tell us stories about them killing people and then would show us their souvenirs." So then they also came forward.
And the police are like, wait, and you didn't tell us?
Yeah, right? So there was enough evidence to make a case with all of those statements. And then in December of 1989, so a full year after he came forward, Graham was arrested in Texas and claimed that what she told her coworkers were just jokes to scare them, which is still super weird and not okay.
Yeah, you don't really joke about that.
No.
No.
You really shouldn't.
Not with your coworkers. Even if you were to joke about it, not with coworkers at a nursing home.
That's just weird. I don't get it. So the police charged her with 6 counts of murder. And Wood pled guilty to second-degree murder, which saved her from a life sentence and was instead given 20 to 40 years. She also took the stand as the star witness against Graham and said that she was only the lookout and it was Graham who planned and carried out the killings. She also said that on top of their 5 victims, Graham had attempted to kill 5 more people who survived. And then, on November 2nd, 1989, Graham was found guilty of 5 counts of murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, and she was given 5 or 6 life sentences with no possibility of parole. There was some disagreement between sources of how many life sentences she got. But her sentence is being carried out at Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility in Michigan. She is still there today, which is good. And then Wood was charged with 1 count of second-degree murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit second-degree murder. And she was sentenced to 20 years on each count and has been eligible for parole since March 2005, but was denied parole for 8 times. And she served her sentence at the Federal correctional institution in Florida and was released on in January 2020 on her 9th parole hearing, with her parole period ending in June 2021. So,
No.
yeah, she's just free in the world right now.
No.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of things that have actually said that she was the mastermind of it all, and now that she's out, like, she might do it again. I know they're just theories, but my God.
Yeah, I have that in my extra information.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna ask if it was kind of like a Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka thing, where like Carla took that deal and said that Bernardo did most of it, but after she got the immunity, it came out that she was a huge part of it. But she's out now too, which is insane to me.
Yeah, and the only like really proof they have is their stories. They don't know how much of a part she actually played. But yeah, she's living in South Carolina with her sister, and everyone in their community is so afraid, like Rebecca said, because they think it's going to start all over again. So now for just some extra information, that was all I had for them. Alpine Manor was sued by several families for hiring, quote, dangerous and unbalanced employees, unquote, which is totally fair. It has now gone out of business, but has turned into a nursing home called Sanctuary at St. Mary's, which I thought was funny because we all went or go to St. Mary's University.
Good.
Yeah. And so another piece of information that I found was season 6 of American Horror Story Roanoke actually corresponds with the crimes of Wood and Graham. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. And so, like, I've never seen it, so I can't really verify it, but I've included my sources if you want to fact check me, and I kind of want to watch it. And their case is the basis of the 1992 true crime novel Forever in 5 Days by Lowell Cauffiel. And in his book, he suggests that Wood was the mastermind of the crimes and actually killed the people. And even a retired investigator believes that she was the mastermind, which is crazy.
And she's out. This is wonderful.
Yeah, so let's hope that she wasn't.
If people just start randomly dying at homes now, senior centers and infant places, we'll blame her.
But the thing is, everyone knows her past. No one's gonna hire her. So is she just gonna kill people off the street?
Maybe she'll find another woman and get with them and be like, hey, I like killing people. Let's kill people. And then they'll find a way to kill people together.
Yeah. I'm really intrigued because now she's totally free. No one's watching her, really.
I'm shocked she's not under surveillance of any type.
Yeah, because the rules were like she can't be around. I thought I had it written down here.
Usually, like, if she's released on probation, she has a whole bunch of rules she has to follow. Like, she has to be home by a certain time. She can't go here. But once her probation's up, like, no one's watching her. She doesn't have any rules to follow. She's just out.
Yeah, and as of last month, she is out.
Great.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and so my last little fun information is that in 2013, apparently Wood had posted an online dating profile on cowtowninfo.com to meet someone new, but inmates were not allowed to do that, so it was taken down. And I find that hilarious because I think Calgary's also called Cowtown. And so I was just
Cowtown Info is jailhousebabes.com. They're also the same thing.
Okay,
Oh
yeah.
my God.
They're female inmates seeking pen pals, aka jailhouse babes.
Okay, yeah, so
Oh my
when she
God.
did this, inmates aren't allowed to have dating profiles with that specific website or something. And so her profile actually said 6'2", 280 pounds, 44, 38, 48. I don't know what those numbers mean. Quote, teach me. I've been incarcerated for 2 decades. I go to the parole board soon, and I need someone who's kind and patient to teach me about the exciting new things in the world. I'm looking for a friend, male or female, to teach me everything I forgot. Are you honest? I am honest and non-judgmental. We can talk about anything and everything. I've never done drugs and I don't smoke. I like to play and have fun. Do you have time for a good friend? End quote.
Yeah, you've never done drugs and don't smoke, but you've also murdered 6 people.
Yeah.
So I feel like that should be mentioned somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's not even just people, it's defenseless elders with Alzheimer's. Like,
Yeah.
that's so cruel.
Yeah. You can't, no. So yeah, if anyone's looking for a honest and
Looking for
non-judgmental
love.
friend who's never done drugs and doesn't smoke, this is your girl.
I love that it's like, are you honest? I'm honest. Does that mean like you're just gonna spill your whole life story as soon as you meet someone? Like over coffee, be like, oh, what do you do in life?
I feel
I'm
like
a mechanic, and she's gonna be like, I'm a serial killer.
Yep. Maybe we should let her date. Maybe the whole story will come out, and then we'll have more against her.
Ooh, good thinking. Who's gonna sacrifice yourself for that? Which one of us?
yeah, exactly. Just catfish her. Actually, I would not want to catfish her in case I became her next victim.
That's fair.
I feel like that would be a lot of work for her to come up to Canada, though.
That's true. That's true. And the border's still
Maybe
closed
if
right
we
now, so maybe now's the time to do it.
Exactly.
I guess
We don't have much spare time to do this, but we should. We'll look into it.
Excellent. But yeah, that is all I have for Gwen Graham and Cathy Wood, the lethal lovers.
Well, thank you for that. I love when we do this, especially when I MC, because I never know any of these stories. So it's quite nice getting the first-hand experience right while we film.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you for that. I will hand it over to Rebecca now. She's going to kind of tell us about female serial killers, why they're a bit obsolete, why they aren't really caught, and I'll let you take the stage now.
Yeah, so I kind of took a little bit of a different spin on it than that, because there's it's more recent that people are really interested in female serial killers. There is more on them, but I find it's been relatively biased for a while for people just saying, like, women can't do that. Women they're too moral for that.
That's
but
not
I have
the
a lot
case.
of statistics.
They're just smarter. We're just smarter, and we can get away with it a bit more, I say.
Yeah, so I want to preface this by just giving, I think we've given definitions before, but just for anyone who might be new, I just wanted to start off with a couple broad definitions of what a serial killer is, for those who aren't exactly sure how a serial killer is different from a regular killer or a mass murderer. So according to the FBI, serial murder is the unlawful killing of 2 or more victims by the same offender, but during separate events. So in serial murder, there's often a cooling off time, so it wouldn't be like 4 victims in 1 or 2 hours. This is different from a mass murder, which is pretty much exactly that. It's an unlawful killing of 4 or more people by an offender during a single event. So this would be an example of like a school shooting. So for the purpose of the discussion, I am going to be discussing female serial killers, but some of the research into female serial killers involves killers that have only murdered 1 or 2 victims as well, just because there isn't as many female killers as there is, so a lot of the research is kind of intertwined. But with that being said, let's get into it. So, as we all know, male serial killers have been very studied and very known for a long time. We have countless TV shows about them and movies, and we hear about them every day.
Yeah.
However, the first, at least that I've been able to find, the first published article that was written about female serial killers and whether or not they exist and their prevalence and all this was only published in 1985.
Oh.
And yeah, it was written by a man named Eric Hickey, and in this paper, basically just to give it a short summary, he concluded that women were incapable of the depravity and immorality that it takes to commit serial murder.
Nice.
So women are just too nice and too kind, and we just love everyone so much that we can't do it.
We just would never. We could never do it.
No.
No. No. Not saying we're all just gonna go out and murder people, but woman would never.
But we're also not just sugar and spice.
We are murder and knives.
So, in response to him discussing his research, as well as a case about an unidentified person who'd poisoned 8 people over 2 years, Eric Hickey brought his research in this discussion to a conference with the FBI, and he was discussing this with some of the other profilers that were there, and one of the profilers, he's pretty notable, his name was Roy Hazelwood, and he was very well known in the FBI. Apparently, in response to this conversation about female serial killers, all he said was, quote, "There are no female serial killers," unquote. There are none. Oh, they don't exist.
Okay.
How many serial murders do you think women got away with before they started identifying female serial killers?
Right. Oh, I'd also like to mention that comment was made in 1998.
Oh, okay.
Even better. I mean, they probably have been getting away with it for a while, considering the first article was in 1985.
In the years that had followed Hickey's initial article, and this conference that they were saying that female serial killers didn't exist, Hickey continued to do his research into this, because I think after learning more about this case of an unknown killer that poisoned 8 people over a couple of years, he started to kind of reassess the knowledge he had about the different serial killers and their sexes. So after a lot more research, he has since changed his opinion, and now he agrees that women can indeed be serial killers, so we're seeing some progress. But this is just an example of how recently people have been in disbelief that an entire sex could commit such heinous crimes. Like, they were completely ignoring half the population just because they, in a simplified way, just didn't think we were equal.
I think it follows that narrative, too, that men are aggressive and females are the victims, kind of thing. You always hear of the female victims and the male offenders. And
Yeah,
at the time,
absolutely.
you never heard of the female offenders and the male victims.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I think that's exactly what the narrative was following. So, with that knowledge of when the research around female serial killers existing, I just wanted to get into statistics of how many there actually are. So, Radford University and Florida Gulf Coast University put together a pretty extensive database of serial killers and related statistics from the past 100 years or so. And their data states that from the 1900s, the decade, to the 2010s, about 11.4% of serial killers have been women internationally. So about 1 in 10 serial killers, that would be, I guess 1.1, but you can't cut humans like that and make them count. So about 1 in 10 serial killers have been women in the past 100 years, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but given how many serial killers there has been, I mean, I think in the 70s or 80s alone, there was over 700.
Oh my.
Yeah.
It's a lot that have probably gone unnoticed or gotten away just because we thought they were men.
So about 70 of those 700 would be women. Is that correct?
Yes.
Math? That's 1 in 10? Okay.
Yes. So, just for comparison, about 11.4% of serial killers were women. And in the same time, about 51.4% of known victims of serial killers were women.
Oh.
Oh.
So women, it's about 50-50 for men and women being the victims, but there's a very, very slight majority for the women, unfortunately, being the victims of serial crime.
This is so strange to me, too, because the research that I'm doing right now, it's like looking at killers and victims in pop culture, and men are always portrayed as serial killers. Like, there's no light shown on the female killers, and all of the victims are portrayed as beautiful, attractive, thin, white females. Like, you don't hear of all of these male victims, and if you do hear of male victims, they're usually homosexual men. And that's what causes them to be a victim.
Yeah. Yeah, there is still, like, even though we're learning more in the scientific community about it, there's still terrible misrepresentation about what the victim and killer populations actually are in media even today.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now we know that there are female serial killers, and there are less of them than men, but they do still exist. We know that they arguably could have gone more unnoticed or uncaught than the men. This is especially based on the average profile that was made of killers during investigations. So from the same database I mentioned earlier from Radford University and Florida Gulf Coast, based on criminal profiles that investigators have made between the years 1990 and 2016, they found that 93.5% of those profiles stated that their suspect was male.
Wowzers.
I'm shocked there's almost that 7% though that was female. Like, it was probably the poisoning cases where they, like, wasn't by force. They were like, maybe this was a woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was pretty shocked to read that number, though. Like, I was like, wow, they hardly still consider the fact that the other sex can do this.
Yeah.
Well, with that profile, too, they're just completely taking out, like you said, Rebecca, 50% of the possibilities, essentially. Like, they're not even thinking of other options. They're narrowing down their search.
Yeah, it's wild. So just moving on from their frequencies, I wanted to talk briefly about how their methods may differ from men, because they are different. So men very frequently, again, as we've seen in pop culture, but also real life, use pretty overt and often violent methods of murder, and these would include like stabbings and shootings, but also things such as asphyxiation or choking. But women serial killers frequently opt out for more covert methods, so ones that will go less detected or aren't as violent. One of the most popular methods of murder among women was poisoning. One source that I read said it was in about 50% of cases they looked at, the female serial killer's preferred method was poisoning, but I've only found that on one source, and it was like a blog type website, so I'm kind of taking it with a grain of salt. But every other source I've read said one of the most popular was poisoning, but others that were quite frequent included smothering, like we saw with the Lethal Lovers, but also drowning, and less frequently, but still there, was stabbing, similar to men. So I guess women, if they do get violent, like the male counterparts, stabbing was one of the preferred methods.
Isn't it said that stabbing is usually like one of the spur of the moment anger methods? Like if something just snaps and they're like, oh, there's a knife beside me, that's how I'm going to kill this person.
I think so, because I think something like poisoning would take more planning, because you need to know what to poison someone with, and you need to know how you're going to do it without them noticing. So I'm not positive. I can't speak with certainty that stabbing is a spur of the moment thing, but that would make sense.
I find it very intriguing that even when women want to kill someone, they choose a very passive method.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
So, like, I'm not going to be violent even when I literally want to kill you.
Yeah.
Maybe we just realized that we're slightly more likely to get away with it if it looks more like an accident.
It's definitely a smarter method, yes.
They're just not worth extra time, honestly.
Exactly.
Just do what you can. Don't put more into it. We're more efficient.
Yeah.
So, similar to the fact that the method of murder is different than men, women's motives for murder is also frequently different from men. So, even though we can have the same motives for murder than men, it's more common that the motives are not sexual pleasure and control based like men. So, one of the most frequent motives for women is actually money and financial gain.
Nice.
I think I learned that in grade 10, shockingly.
Really?
In my introduction to anthropology, sociology, and psychology, that was like the one thing I remember about female killers.
That would be such a fun class in high school. I had nothing like that.
Me neither.
Yeah. It was really cool. Anyways, continue.
Yeah, so in a study I read by Harrison, Hughes, and Gott in 2019, they compared the crimes, patterns, and motives of female and male serial killers, and they had found that while just 16.7% of male serial killers' primary motive was financial gain, it was the primary motive for women at 51.9% of female serial killers committing their murders for that purpose.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Yeah, and in contrast, just to give some, what's the word? Just to give some insight into the sexual motives of it all, the primary motive for males in 75% of cases was sexual pleasure and control, but in women, that was only 7.9%.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Would Graham and like the Lethal Lovers case, be considered a sexual pleasure kind of killing?
That was exactly my question. Exactly my question.
I think in a way they would fall into a couple categories. I mean, I guess typologies are different than motives. So in terms of motive, then yes, I personally think they would fall into the category of sexual pleasure. But I think in terms of the typology of the killers, which I'm going to get into in a second, they would actually fall into a couple, which I thought was a little bizarre, because usually they seem like they'd be a little pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
I think because, like, after each of their crimes, they gained sexual pleasure out of it with each other. Like, I think you could see that as a motive. But they're also, like, it could have also turned that they started to kill because it aroused them, and so that's why they did it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a very real possibility. So just before I get into the typologies, I just wanted to say one more statistic, which was about the difference in judicial punishment and specifically death penalty. So in the same study that I had just mentioned, it was reported that for serial killers receiving the death penalty, approximately just 23.6% of female serial killers did, and this is in contrast to male serial killers who 54.5% of them received the death penalty. So
Wow.
Women definitely are viewed in a better light. Less people don't judge them as harshly, which I don't understand, because I think a serial killer is a serial killer and you should be judged equally, but
Do you think it's because of these differences in methods? Like, if a man was to be more aggressive and brutalize his victim more than a female serial killer, the jury and judge is more likely to, like, they'll be more influenced by that, and hearing that, it's like, I know emotion's not supposed to sway your opinion in the courtroom, but I feel like it would have some component to it if you're comparing brutally beaten to death or poisoned and died in sleep.
I think that's a really real possibility. I didn't look much more into the reasons for why the death penalty sentence was so different between them, but I definitely think that one of the reasons is the vast difference in method used, because like you said, emotion shouldn't get involved in the judicial system, but jurors are humans too, and they're going to be swayed by their own biases.
Yeah, I agree.
So the last thing that I wanted to discuss on this topic was the typology of female serial killers. Various different researchers have created their own typologies, so I have found a couple. I'm going to discuss the one created by Keller and Keller. Not necessarily because it's maybe not the most accurate or most widely used. I believe the FBI uses a different one. But this is one that, like, when you're watching crime shows and you're hearing about female serial killers in the media, like, they often use a couple of these terms to describe them. And I just thought it would be interesting to hear what exactly they mean when they're discussing a Black Widow or an Angel of Death. So Keller and Keller identified 9 typologies of female serial killers, and those are the Black Widow, the Angel of Death, the sexual predator, the revenge, the for-profit or crime killer, the team killers, the question of sanity, the unexplained, and finally the unsolved. So I'm just going to give a brief summary of each of those. A Black Widow is a woman who murders her romantic partners, and it's usually for their money. So typically this woman would start in their mid-20s, and they'll get married, probably get signed as a beneficiary of an insurance policy, and then kill their partner, and it was usually through a covert method that we discussed earlier, like poisoning or smothering to look like an accident, and then they would receive the insurance money, lay low for a bit, act like a grieving widow, but then they would remarry and then do it all over again. And often these people got away for quite some time before people started to realize that every one of their husbands are mysteriously dying, and they start to get questioned.
Sorry to interrupt, but do you remember it was a couple months ago in Nova Scotia, there was a woman that was released in her 80s, and she was deemed as a dangerous offender. And she was one of these, she was one of these Black Widows, I guess, because she just kept killing her husbands, and it didn't come out until she was super old.
I was just going to ask about that.
Yeah.
That's crazy that there was one so close to us that was released.
Right.
At least we know we're safe, though.
Yeah. All the old men need to keep their eyes open, though.
So the second one mentioned was an Angel of Death, and the Angel of Death is one of the typologies that I believe the Lethal Lovers would be. This is when a woman, or in this case women, are a caretaker of some sort, so they could be a nurse or they could just be a personal care assistant, and they attack the people who are in their care. So one of the most common methods for this murder for Angels of Death includes injecting lethal amounts of drugs or chemicals that are found in the place of care that might go undetected or be out of their system faster than they can do an autopsy, including potassium or insulin, or like the lethal level, my goodness, or like the Lethal Lovers, that's a little bit of a tongue twister to me, they'll suffocate their victims. But most often, Angels of Death will act in hospitals or nursing homes or anywhere that there are vulnerable patients that need looking after. And unfortunately, like we heard with the Lethal Lovers, the murderer is often someone that is pretty highly regarded. No one has anything negative to say about them. They trust them. They think they're in good care, but then they're murdered.
Do you think under this Angel of Death, it can then split again into two, whereas there's people who use the disguise basically as a caretaker just to kill people, and then there's also the ones that do think that they're taking them out of their misery, they're helping older people move on with life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I didn't read anything about that, but I definitely think that's a possibility. Like, I don't know if they would type those differently, but I know that there definitely have been killers that kill people because they're like, oh, I thought I was helping them.
Yeah.
They seemed unhappy, so I think it's a possibility. The third typology that I had mentioned, and the other one that I think is a possibility that the Lethal Lovers could be, is sexual predators. And I'm not going extensively into this because with female serial killers, a sexual predator is quite rare, but they pretty much share all of the associated characteristics with a male sexual predator. So I'm a little unsure whether or not Cathy and Gwen would fall into this, just because I know sexual predators often act out their sexual fantasies on the victim, but I don't know if maybe voyeurism or killing to get off with your partner is part of that. I'm not positive, but it's a possibility. The next one are revenge killers, and this sounds pretty self-explanatory. These are women who are seeking revenge on someone, and they kill them. They think this is good revenge. I'm unsure of why serial murderers feel like they need revenge on multiple people. Like, how many people have wronged you? But their victims are usually family members, so they don't often do it with just friends or people they walk down the street. It's usually a member of their family, and more than you'd expect, also a child in their family. And usually this is done by suffocation or poisoning, and the crime spree for these killers will often only last around 2 years or so before they're caught. The next one was for profit or crime, and this is pretty similar to a Black Widow because it's for financial gain, but in this case they target people who aren't their spouse or family. These serial killers are very organized and patient, and their crimes are well planned. I am interested in this one because I don't know how you would financially gain from someone you're not related to or married to.
Yeah.
Could it be through a business of some sort?
Oh, I
like
didn't think
your
about that.
employer, or like if you're the next in line to become whatever high up? Like, that's the only thing I could think of.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that, but I can see that as happening.
Yeah, definitely.
'Cause, yeah, I
like
was thinking about it
employers or
during
business partners.
Yeah, because I was
Yeah.
thinking about it during my research, and I was like, if you just kill someone walking down the street, how are you going to make money off of that?
Unless
Oh,
you, like, steal
hitmen.
their identity. Yeah.
Would they fit that category? Because technically they are serial killers.
And they are for profit. They do make a profit killing people.
And they don't kill their own friends and family. Usually.
I think this is something we need to look into. Are female hitmen for-profit serial killers?
Do you think
I'm
there's a lot
genuinely
of...
intrigued.
In a
I was
follow-up
just
question, how many female hitmen are there?
Right? You only hear of the male hitmen in movies. What about the female hitmen?
Isn't that who Black Widow is? To just, like, the new movie?
Basically.
The new Marvel
Yeah.
movie? It wasn't.
I don't recommend it.
Oh, don't
Side note.
spoil it for me. I want to watch it real bad. Doesn't she start off as, like, a female assassin?
Yeah, so, like, her backstory basically is she's, like, taken and turned into a fighter, basically.
Oh, okay. Kind of like that Red Sparrow movie with Jennifer Lawrence 100 years ago.
I've never seen that one, but
Okay,
sure.
I think
But
that's the same
I think it
premise.
is similar to that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the next category is team killers. There are other names for this in other typologies, but they break them down even further, and unfortunately right now I don't have that information on hand. But team killers are women who murder with a partner or multiple people. So this could be a romantic partner, but it doesn't need to be. And the partner could be male or female. However, in these situations, the specific motive for the crime can vary significantly because it's a mix-mash of all the people that are committing this murder. So it's not just a woman doing it for financial gain. It might be her doing it for that, but the male doing it for sexual gratification. So it could vary. But often in these situations, when the partner's a male, the crimes they commit are more often sexual homicides than they are overt or just because they're doing it. So I think about Paul and Carla Homolka in this case. They're all sexual homicides. And similarly, thinking about them, women, when they are a partner to a male in these team killing duos, are often seen as the passive partner in crime. So the one that's kind of like they're for it because their partner's there and they want to support them. But often it does come out that they had more of an involvement than we thought they did.
Yes, which could easily happen with Cathy Wood and Gwen Graham.
Absolutely.
Do you think there's, like, book club team killers? Like, it's just a group of women that each have their own financial gain, and they're like, let's just go kill people, and then we'll have a book club after. Like, that's what I imagine with team killers.
I would watch a movie about that.
Me too.
We should
Isn't
make a
that the
spin.
movie Women Who Kill? Isn't that kind of the same?
I've never seen it. I know there's a book called Women Who Kill.
I only saw a TikTok about it. But that was kind of the
TikTok?
premise that I got. So, not very reliable source. I'll maybe do some research and get back to you.
Okay. I mean, I learn everything off TikTok now, so honestly, you never know.
Yeah.
So the final three typologies, they can also be applied to men. They're all pretty dual sex. The third to last is question of sanity, and this one is basically people who murder, but there's a judgment in their culpability, so they might not have been mentally fit, or they could have been going through a psychotic episode, or they might have been mentally ill. They could have been sleepwalking. I've heard stories where people sleepwalking have killed. But basically, they're just cases that their mental state needs to be thoroughly evaluated to determine whether or not they were actually culpable for the murder when they were committing it. The next one is unexplained murders, and these are basically all of the female serial killers that don't fit into all of the prior typologies. These are ones that either we don't know the reasons they committed their crimes, or they just did it for reasons that aren't general enough that we haven't been able to make a specific typology just for them. And the final one is unsolved, which also sounds pretty self-explanatory. Unsolved cases are just cases of serial murder that we don't know who the killer is, but we suspect that it is a serial killer committing these crimes, and the investigators are fairly confident that the perpetrator is a woman based on just the patterns and the motives and the types of victims. So that's all I have to say today about female serial killers. It is a really interesting topic, and I would like to continue looking into it. So if anyone has anything more they'd like to teach us about it, that'd be super cool.
Yeah, or another female serial killer that we can research and then find more information about female serial killers to do another episode on.
Yeah, I have a whole book of female serial killers. And
I almost bought it.
Yeah, I have it right. I went and ran and got it. I was gonna say I recommend. It's called "Women Who Kill: A Chilling Casebook of True Life Murders" by Al Camino. I don't know if this is the same one you have, but like Eileen Wuornos is in it. Carla Homolka. No one else that I have ever heard of. Rosemary West. She was her and her husband. But yeah, it's a lot of people that you've never ever heard of, unlike male serial killers. But
weren't like Graham and Wood in either yours or Rebecca's? Isn't that where we got the topic from?
Yeah, I can't find the book that I have at the moment, but I think it's different than the one Nicole has, and Cathy and Gwen are the first case in the book.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they're not in this one, so.
I'll put the book, and maybe Nicole and Journey, I think you said you had one too. We'll all put our books in the sources, so if you want to check them out, then there's a few reading materials for you.
Yeah.
I recommend them. They're like little short stories. It's not a full novel, which is nice.
Yeah, like the chapters aren't consecutive. It's a different case each chapter, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that. I knew about some differences, but it was interesting to hear the actual numbers between men and women. Our next topic is, since we all met in Nova Scotia, none of us were technically from Nova Scotia, but we have lived here for a bit. We've decided to do our next episode about various Nova Scotian stories. So we're going to talk about the Butterbox Babies, the Goler clan, and the Sydney River McDonald's murders. So they're kind of a weird amalgamation of cases. They're not quite all the same at all, but it'll be like our little unsolved mysteries that we did last year near Halloween time.
And kind of like our cannibal episode too.
Oh yeah, I forgot we did that. Yeah, like that one. That would make more sense, yeah. I do have a joke for you.
Excellent.
Nice.
So why are there so few female serial killers?
Why?
Because after completing the first one, they just can't help but tell others.
Yeah.
Honestly, if I ever were to anything happen, if I were to kill someone, first thing I'd do, I'd probably message the chat and be like, guys, guess what?
Guess what happened?
Guess what?
I know we're really bad at keeping secrets.
I am too. So just don't tell me secrets if you want them kept.
On that note, Journey, where can everyone find us?
They can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at What the Forensics. Our Twitter is WT Forensics PC. Our website is whattheforensics.ca, and you can look at all of our sources, some source images we have for the odd episode, who we are, a little bit about us, and you can buy stickers off of it as well. And our email is whattheforensics@gmail.com if you just want to get in touch with us.
I also recommend we are most active on Instagram and Facebook. Keep an eye out as well. We're thinking of doing a little bit of a giveaway. We've got a little mug and some stickers and stuff. We just haven't figured out anything for it yet, so keep your eye open for it. Anyways, though, this has been another episode of What the Forensics. Thank you for waiting for this episode and being patient. The three of us hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.
Just a reminder to everyone that we are not professionals in the forensic science field. We are just students who are learning and want to share what we are learning with our listeners. We're trying to give you the most accurate information, but we are human and we can make mistakes. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you next week.